Thank you, Jameson. Kia ora, I'm Hamish. I don't have a screen. I'm just going to be talking to the camera. I've been involved in New Zealand's government rulers code exploration over the last year and in a wider personal exploration of institutions and what defines them a lot longer. In our democracy, we have a rule that every adult person is qualified to be registered as an elector with a number of conditions. This act of voting to choose who represents us in government is a foundational statement about how we distribute power in our country, and the rule conveying this power is contained in a piece of legislation. With my 5 minutes, I want to focus on how rules as code impacts on the flow distribution of power in our democracies and why using this perspective will help us towards achieving our goals and better considered solutions. Democracy attempts to distribute power more equally to every adult through voting. Our law in New Zealand is meant to follow a similar paradigm by being openly published and available to all. I want to acknowledge this open access isn't something that's necessarily common in other jurisdictions. The reality, however, is that one does not simply read the legislation.gov.nz website. There's over 4,000 acts, bills, and instruments published there, and having spent some time coding legislation, I appreciate the difficulties in gaining comprehension. To solve this here in New Zealand, we've invented this new group of people that we call lawyers, who comprehend the law for us. They, however, cost a lot of money and can vary a lot in effectiveness. With widening economic inequality in our country, this needs money to access the law has caused a gradual redistribution of power towards those who are the best crowdfunders. This brings us to one of the often touted opportunities of rules as code. Once you have the code, programmers can build what I call comprehension machines, or websites that explain the law in a personalized fashion. Why this is generally appealing is it represents a small redistribution of power within the population towards a less wealth-orientated perspective, and this better fits with our democratic ideals. So my purpose here is to encourage you to view rules as code from the perspective of how it affects the flow and distribution of power. A first step with this is to encourage you to not view technology from the perspective of good or bad. Better or worse, good and bad are our personal human perspectives. The best that technology can do is to make efficiencies. Here's the reason I say this. While hopefully you might share with me the idea perhaps that slavery is bad, when we talk about making systems better, we should really say more efficient, because often what is an efficient system to achieve your idea of good is also likely an efficient system for the person who thinks slavery is good. This love of efficiency technology often comes blind to the fact that it equally favours your good and what you consider bad. As such, we must approach technology with a wide as possible view on how efficiencies can be used for bad. I like to say, keep your good intentions close, but those bad intentions closer. A classic example of this delusion in the technology space is the term social media, an equally invalid name being anti-social media. So the designers of our inherited democratic institutions understood this and designed in what they call checks and balances in our democracy. These are a hedge against the reconcentration of power. I know that this is bad if you want to be an evil overlord. I view technology as inherently indistinguishable from our institutions, and so believe that the same approaches are required. If we want to uphold the democratic conventions we have inherited, then designing in these checks and balances is our responsibility. These checks won't ever be enough, sorry, blockchain, but they will always require people to stand up for what they believe is right. But I'm very interested in exploring what these might look like in this space. A good example from this, from the better rules space, is the idea that we can make laws more people-orientated by leveraging machines from the policy space to simulate the effects of law changes and build up test suites that represent the wide range of scenarios we humans often generate. There's this beautiful concept I learned from the France experience, where the test suite started collecting real-world scenarios that the law didn't cater well to. These can be used to better inform future policy development. This making laws more human by using machines, once explained, is often well received. However, it's also loaded with good intentions, where you need to be more considered if we don't want to also be complicit in the use of such efficiencies to something we might consider bad, for example, the redistribution of power away from people based on race. So recently we got to work with a government department here in New Zealand with a very large act that also has quite an extensive case history attached to it and historically a lot of litigation. Working with the policy and legal people from that organisation who were tasked with interpreting the act, I realised they were in a rather tenuous position. When your job is to implement a large complex piece of law that's been passed by the elected members and which hasn't been executed, and by that I mean it hasn't been implemented on machines before and you now have to do that, if you are doing your job well, you quickly realize you're often in a position of unintended power delegation and with decisions that profoundly affect others. I'm not talking about when the law explicitly delegates decisions, but when the law doesn't provide a clear answer to the scenario you have to present to. This often gets wrapped up in all the other activities. That is what we call small p policy, but I believe it's important to keep it separate and view it as an accidental redistribution of power, of which its impact should not be underestimated. It is often said that the best way to test a person's character is to give them power. Viewing the position of these policy and legal people from this perspective on power leads to an understanding about why they feel a need to maintain information control over their small p policy decisions. They cannot predict the consequences that information might have on any decisions that go to court, and when courts fine against government departments, that subsequently reflects badly on their organisations, their bosses, and their elected members. Rules as code offers the opportunity to significantly reduce this accidental redistribution of power, providing a much more robust and tested legislation to the department. Ultimately, this could possibly achieve the ideal of these small p policy decisions being held in the public space. But it's important to approach this with an understanding that is the redistribution of power away from the department. Viewed from that perspective, it allows for a more nuanced view as to how the landscape should be navigated, recognizing that some personality types don't like giving up power, while others will beg you to take it away. Also recognizing that departments will need to learn to relax into this new open approach that is this redistribution of power. So I'm wanting to, another perspective.
Hamish, we've reached the 5-minute mark. I don't know.
I'll just wrap up then by saying the redistribution of power is often disruptive, and when viewing rules as code from this perspective, you'll be able to better anticipate and navigate the space.
Awesome. If you were reading that from something and want to post that in the notes, feel free to drop it in. That way other people can read and reflect on what you thought.